As a creative, you may be brilliant at music, at art, at design, but don't let yourself be taken advantage of by others who would exploit that talent. Have great people in your circle of friends, among your partners, that are aligned with your success.
Welcome to Object, Subject, Form, a series of conversations exploring the human side of creativity at the evolving intersection of art, technology, and finance. Today's conversation is with physician, entrepreneur, and private equity investor Kneeland Youngblood. Kneeland is the founding partner and CEO of Pharaoh's Capital Group. He has led the firm in managing over $1.2 billion in assets, focusing on value-based healthcare investments that address social health issues and promote diversity. Appointed by President Bill Clinton, he served on the United States Enrichment Corporation Board, and President Joe Biden appointed him to the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. Kneeland also serves on the boards of several prominent organizations, including the California Institute of Technology, the Milken Institute, the Black Economic Alliance, and is the lead director of Light and Wonder. His past board memberships include Starwood Hotels, Burger King, Gap, and the American Beacon Funds. In this episode, we'll explore the transformative power of mentorship and the importance of guidance and continuous learning for personal growth. Kneeland, thank you so much for coming by and having this conversation. I know you have a flight in a few hours, so I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Your journey has not only shaped your own success, but has also had a profound impact on the lives of others through the generosity of your time and the selfless pursuit of helping others. And I've read that you recognized quite early that no matter how successful you were going to be at medicine, it wouldn't have enabled you to have the impact you wanted in your career, which ultimately led you to the path of business and private equity. And that's a pretty big pivot. So what was it that actually led you to go down this path?
Well, first off, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you, Simon. Again, in life, I think we're all presented with different opportunities and the potential to pivot. In my particular case, all I knew growing up was doctor, lawyer, teacher, preacher. I didn't know anything about business, so I was never exposed to it. So in my case, I went on a very focused path of either medicine or law. As it happened, I was able to get to medical school. I thought I was going to be a heart surgeon, and I called one of the alumni network people who I knew. I went to Princeton, and I called one of the guys there and said, look, I'd like to come by and talk to you about being a heart surgeon. And he said, great, come by and see me anytime, but you should go see my roommate first. I thought, that's odd. His roommate was in Houston, Texas. I lived in Dallas, but I drove down to see his roommate first, and his roommate happened to be Black. And this was the most extraordinary man I'd ever met. His name was John C. Norman. He had gone to Howard University at 15, transferred to Harvard, finished summa cum laude, turned down the Rhodes Scholarship, went to Harvard Medical School, great room with Dr. Urschel, trained in cardiovascular surgery at Columbia Fellowship in the UK, came back on the faculty at Harvard, and had been recruited to Texas to be the first director of research at the Texas Heart Institute, which is doing more heart surgery than any place in the world. And I met this man, and I realized I'm not that good. I saw in him the very best at his profession, and I knew no matter how hard I worked, no matter what I did, I could never be that good at that. And he was an extraordinary man who I loved and became a wonderful friend and mentor of sorts as well. And he was the first person to really challenge me, in a different way. Most people had patted me on the back because I had some level of success. And he was, well, you haven't done this, you haven't done that, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. And
Yep.
so it really woke me up. I then went back to medical school and said, I got to change what I'm doing. And I wrote a proposal, got funding, and I went to the Middle East. I went principally to Egypt, but also Israel and Jordan. And I had an apartment in the Nile, on the Nile, pyramids in the background. And I would go out to the, desert there, Sahara Desert, looking at the pyramids and just meditate about my life, about my future, about my ultimate death. And saying to myself, when I die and taking my last breath, who is it I want to be? What does I want to define me? And maybe I can reverse engineer to get to that point in the decisions I make moving forward. Because being in that desert, looking at those pyramids, it makes you feel so small. Again, 5,000 years before Christ, you see these historic monuments and you realize we're all just dust in the wind. We're all just dust in the wind. And so I came back from that experience and said, okay, I need to change my direction. I decided to do emergency medicine because it was fun, interesting, immediate gratification. You generally don't work more than 15 days out of the month, not more than 3 days in a row. But what it would do is create optionality for me. And unlike other fields of medicine, you don't have an office practice. When you leave the emergency department, you just walk out the door. And if I ever left medicine, I could simply walk out the door. I didn't have to worry about, the continuity of patient care.
You can switch off.
I could switch off. And so that's really what led me to emergency medicine. I trained in surgery in New York, did my residency in emergency medicine in Atlanta, came back to Dallas and practiced emergency medicine for 12 years. As you mentioned, again, there are different experiences that cause you to reflect and potentially pivot. In my case, I got involved in politics. While women and people of color had been involved in politics in the United States for some time, they hadn't really been involved in the money side of politics. And I'd had experience as a 14-year-old to work in the Texas legislature and understood that money was the driver of politics. And so I gathered my friends together and we began to hold fundraisers. First with a gentleman by the name of Bill Bradley, who was running for the Senate in New Jersey. Hosted a fundraiser for him, very successful. Became godfather of one of my kids. Then Ann Richards was running for governor of Texas. Raised money for her. She became governor. And Carol Moseley Braun in Illinois. Through a good friend of mine, John Rogers, we raised money for her. Ron Brown asked me to help a guy named Bill Clinton. We raised money for him. And I looked around and, I knew people, in the White House and the governor's mansion and all these different power centers. And Bill Bradley, Senator Bradley, said something very simple but very profound to me. He said, if the president of the United States walks in the room, what's your ask? I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, don't get distracted with the lights, cameras, all the rest. If you're in a room with the president, you're there for a reason. They know what they want out of you. You should know what you want out of them. And so Ann Richards called me and said, I'm governor. I want to appoint you to the Board of Medical Examiners. And I said, no, I want to be on the tax policy committee. She was like, well, wait, you don't understand. Being on the Board of Medical Examiners, you're a doctor. This is the most prestigious thing I can do for you. This is a big deal. And I said, no, I want to be on the tax policy committee. She said, why on earth would you want to be on the tax policy committee? I said, because the tax policy committee is composed of CEOs from around the state of Texas. And if it's important enough for them, it's important enough for me. And there's no one like me in that room. I want to be in that room. Which then led to her saying, okay, it's yours. I don't understand, but I trust your judgment. I'm in the hospital one day. The nurse hands me the phone. Dr. Youngblood, this guy wants to talk to you something about tax policy committee. I get on the phone. I'm busy. I'm saving lives. Can I help you? And he says, look, you don't know me. My name's Don Williams. I'm the CEO of a company called Trammell Crow. I'm on the tax policy committee. You're on the tax policy committee. The meetings are in Austin. Why don't we go together? And I said, sure. What American Airlines flight are you on? Or Southwest Airlines flight are you on? He said, no, I have my own jet. So come fly with me. So I got on the jet and realized I'm in the wrong business. it was that moment of revelation where going back to my time in Egypt and said, okay, at the end of your life, when you're taking your last breath, are you going to take advantage of all the opportunities that are presented you? And this was a world I was not familiar with at all. And I saw Don Williams, the CEO there, a man who I came to enjoy and really respect. But I didn't see anything in him that I didn't see in myself, except I'd never been exposed. And so it was at that moment where I said, I'm quitting medicine.
Wow.
Pure and simple.
What was it, just to rewind quickly, when you said that you wouldn't, or you thought that you wouldn't be able to be the best, in that field? There's many people that could be second best, third best, fourth best, 50, 100. What was it about, your instincts that led you to just be, if I'm not going to be first, I don't want to do this?
What it was I saw this man have a passion for what he was doing. Not only was he the best at what he was doing, he had a passion for it that I didn't have in medicine.
I see.
He had a passion, and I recognized that I could be a very good physician, and I was a very good physician, but I didn't live and breathe that profession as I felt like I should in order to be the very best.
Mm-hmm.
And, this was a man who, albeit extreme, commuted from Concord, Massachusetts, outside of Boston, to Houston. He never moved from Massachusetts to Houston. He lived at the hospital with a Great Dane, and he was there 7 days a week, except when he went home to visit his wife and daughter in Massachusetts.
It's extreme dedication.
Extreme, and so I saw that passion, that love, and I recognized that I didn't have that. I wasn't going to have that. And I wanted to have that in my life.
For something. And when you spent that time away, you realized the importance of really having that passion, because, pretty much we're here once, if that's what we believe. Mm-hmm. And to be here once, to have that kind of impact and leave a mark, on this planet as to, who I am and what I did, you just didn't feel like that was the path to go down. And you were, how old were you when you realized this? Because it's pretty mature to realize that.
24.
So you realized young enough to be able to pivot.
Correct.
And, be able to change your complete trajectory, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
And of course, the pivot from heart surgery to emergency medicine, I did that when I was a junior, going to my senior year of medical school. The larger pivot was, of course, later, in my 40s, when I decided to quit medicine and actually go into private equity.
And so what was it on the plane? Because this seems like a big part of it. Like when you went on the plane and you realized on the private jet and you realized, okay, what I'm doing is really not what I want to do. And wow, I'm actually exposed. Was it like a blindfold coming off you to see how the other half lived?
Yes.
Yeah.
It opened the aperture up in my life that I was exposed to a whole different set of people, different caliber of people. And I came to understand that as much as I enjoyed practicing medicine and I was good at it, I could not have the type of impact that I could by exiting medicine and working on a larger platform, and that platform being in the business community. Because I was stitching people up, sending them back in the same environments, only to have them rotate back in with the same types of trauma and challenges. So
And what was that impact that you desired to have?
Well, first off, the impact was personal. Have I done my very best to fulfill who I am, what I am, and why I'm here?
Yeah.
And so first, doing and being the best that I can and the most that I can while I have this limited time on earth. So that was first and foremost. And then I've been the beneficiary of extraordinary blessings. I had wonderful parents, 4 brothers, 2 sisters, but my parents gave my siblings and I unconditional love. And they showed us, not through just words, but through their example, personal sacrifice, delayed gratification, and taught us a number of things, including, for me, this idea that never let money get in the way of your success. I know that sounds odd, but there were 7 kids in my family. My parents said to us, look, we know we can't afford to send all of you all to school, to college, but you do your absolute very best in school, we'll make it happen. We will make it happen, no matter what. All 7 of us went to college. All 7 of us graduated from college. Many of us went to graduate school. And these were people who didn't have, and I'm not saying they were poor, they weren't poor, but they didn't have those kinds of resources. But they, through their determination, they showed me, look, don't worry about the money, take care of your business, and we'll figure it out.
Right.
And that attitude has guided me with regard to how I've been successful in some of the business opportunities.
You say it comes down to having the drive and the vision and the passion that you're speaking of.
Correct.
It kind of puts you in the right places because you're really, driven to succeed in that you're driving towards. And I guess as a result of that, I mean, not all the time, but, in my experiences and with people who I've also spoken to before, if you are on that track, you've got more of a chance of meeting some of these people who might be able to point you in the right direction because you become obsessed and absorbed with that area of topic or career or trajectory.
Without a doubt.
No question. Yeah. So there's something really important there. You went from kind of working to ownership. And I think that's a big jump for people such as myself, like as a creative. We oftentimes have a kind of a clear direction of what we want to make. And, we're looking at, ways in which we can perfect our craft. And then there's the business side of it that comes into it as well. And so it's almost like using the other side of the brain and waking up the kind of business mentality around your career and learning the business side of whatever you might be doing. How was that change for you, going from an employee, to probably an employer?
Well, what I would say is this. My mindset has always been independence and kind of self-determination. So part of the reason why I went into medicine was because I felt I could be my own person. And in the case of emergency medicine, I actually was not employed by the hospital. I was not, we had a group. We were all independent contractors. And so we took care of our own business. And so it was very much still being my own person. Notwithstanding that, in founding a private equity firm and having great partners, I was able to much better understand really the business side of medicine because we invest in healthcare. And in that regard, you have to change your way of thinking. And in my particular case, not only was I able to educate myself about business, but also have a great partner who was very astute in terms of his acumen with regard to finance. I have often said I could never be as good in finance as my partner. He finished number one in his class, Princeton, Goldman Sachs, et cetera. He's forgotten more than I've ever learned. But we are very complementary in the sense of he brings skills to the table and I bring other skills to the table that are very good and complementary. And so as a creative, you may be brilliant at music, at art, at design, but don't let yourself be taken advantage of by others who would exploit that talent. Have great people in your circle of friends, among your partners, that are aligned with your success. You do well, they do well. You don't do well, they don't do well. and so even if you aren't an astute person in business, there's the judgment about surrounding yourself with people, who are going to have your best interest in mind and not just their interest in mind. And so, again, creatives tend to be, many of them, very passionate about that particular work of art or that song or that bit of poetry and block out all these other things. And all I'm saying is be the best creative you can, but don't be exploited. Have people in your life that you trust, who are trustworthy and who share your values with regard to what it is you're trying to bring to your own legacy.
Right. And you don't have to do it all yourself.
You don't have to do it all yourself.
I think that's where we get caught up, and I think, there's the control aspect of things. And I suppose you can get caught up in wanting all of the pie, but I think like you said, you're not going to have all of the talent or inputs that is needed to potentially create something that is bigger than yourself. And so if you do surround yourself with the right people, get introduced to the right people, or make sure that, you're actively searching for that, then maybe you can actually take your idea to the level that you want to take it to.
Without a doubt. And I think part of the challenge among creatives, unlike many professions, there isn't necessarily a proven way of doing it. Meaning, if you're going to medicine, okay, I got a pre-med set of courses, I got medical school, I got internship, I got residency, I got the train,
It's a structure.
There's a structure to it.
Yep.
The same thing with regard to law or accounting or these other things. Okay, I want to be a painter. Again, you can go to art school, but then it gets very nebulous.
Yep.
And so that creates extraordinary opportunity, but also vulnerability.
Right.
If you don't have great people in your life who are advising you, who are looking out for your best interests as opposed to just their own, it can be extraordinarily frustrating. It can be very limiting. And quite frankly, some of the best talent, some of the best skills can be lost to sharing not because the art wasn't great, but because the manager, the agent, these other people who are supposed to be watching out for your best interest aren't.
Yeah. Or you didn't know how to reach out and find people around you, which, does lead into this topic of mentorship. And I think, you're not only just speaking about business partners or people that can like directly help you, and be involved in, your venture, but also mentors that you might meet to be able to just gain advice, be pointed in the right direction. So, on this topic, what is mentorship to you? Like, how would you describe it from your perspective?
Well, I personally have been very fortunate to have many great mentors in my life. And part of that is a function of the fact that I sought them out. So I think it takes two. I think you have to seek out mentors, but also people have to be receptive to being your mentor. And not everyone is receptive to being a mentor, or maybe not a mentor to you and what have you. I think it's important that as you are trying to navigate whatever, course it is in life, and it may be personal mentorship, it may be professional mentorship, that you seek out people who've been very good at it,
right.
At whatever it is you're, aspire to do. In my particular case, I had 3 extraordinary mentors, especially in the business community. A gentleman by the name of Richard Rainwater, who came out of a high net worth family called the Bass family. A gentleman by the name of David Bonderman, also who came out of the Bass family and founded a firm called TPG. And then Michael Milken, who is a financier and, a brilliant philanthropist and one of the, great minds, not only in business, but in philanthropy and in impact in the world.
What was it about these mentors that, attracted you to want to reach out? Take David Bonderman, for example. Like, what was it about him?
What it was about was in seeing him and meeting him, he took the time to meet with me. This was an enormously successful man who not only took the time to meet with me, but also included me beyond just meeting. So inviting me on a family vacation with he and his wife and other, friends of many, many years, going to the South Pacific, to French Polynesia, which was quite extraordinary. These are people who had known for decades. And my wife and I, he had not known that particularly long, but included us in those types of things. And I would also say he was someone who, no matter where he was in the world, I could call and he would be responsive, which was frightening to some extent, but also reassuring. And it also made me recognize how important it is when you have mentors, don't waste their time. And not just mentors, don't waste people's time. Just, people are busy, especially very successful people.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to call upon them, have a very good reason and also something it's actionable that they could address, be succinct. And, they're not there to solve your problems. They're there to help advise you. And so you need to be concise and understand exactly what you want, when, what, how, why, that kind of thing.
And part of that comes from actually researching who you're approaching.
Precisely.
Right?
Without a doubt.
Yeah. I think it could be quite difficult, though, for some people who, are looking at these very successful potential mentors and having that kind of anxiety of even reaching out, particularly if, there's a kind of economic disparity there. Obviously, if somebody is extremely successful, probably extremely wealthy, have a completely different life. As you said, when you're on the private jet, you're exposed to this completely new world. So there can be, it could be quite difficult, and you could have some even fears of reaching out to people. How would you advise those who might be in that kind of position of almost like, fear to reach out, being scared to waste somebody's time, or the rejection of no.
Right. Well, first off, what I would say is I was fortunate in that regard because I did practice medicine. I came to understand that everyone is the same. It doesn't matter titles. It doesn't matter balance sheet. It doesn't matter prestige, anything. People are all the same. And when they came into the emergency department, clutching their chest with a heart attack, or their child was killed in a car accident, or someone, had some other tragedy or calamity, everyone is the same. And so I think understand that no matter who it is, whether it's Elon Musk or, the homeless person down the street. Again, we all are human beings. We all have fears, loves, hopes, aspirations, traumas, successes, you name it. And look, you should approach people regardless. All they can do is say no, and you have to have the resilience within yourself, but also the purpose that, in yourself that says, look, I'm not going to let a no stop me from succeeding. In my world, no means not yet. Nietzsche said that he who has found his why in life can tolerate almost any how. So finding your why in life, again, you can tolerate any how.
Yeah. So long as you have your purpose,
your purpose,
what you want to do.
Yes.
Yeah. I would say in my career, it's always good to take time and connect the dots and look back and take some time out and meditate on where you are. When I do look back, I've seen the importance of mentors. They may not even know who I am, but I'm researching and I'm watching and trying to learn, even if I haven't reached out, reading books, understanding how somebody got to where they are. And I think it's really important to recognize that the importance of people being able to guide you and to have as many figures like this in your life as possible, and surrounding yourself with, like you said before, people who actually care morally about who you are and what you're trying to pursue.
I would also say, to your point, again, you have people as mentors. It's equally as important that you try to contribute in some way to their life.
100%.
It may be, again, you don't have the necessarily financial wherewithal, but it may be an introduction to someone who you know. It may be helping their child. It may be whatever. And so just the fact that you're making the effort in some ways, genuinely making the effort is really important.
It becomes a two-way street at that
Correct.
point. And eventually you may get to a position where you're actually helping your mentor.
Precisely.
Right. Which, where you get to a point through the investment that someone else has made in you. I think that's like an ultimate goal, actually, is to be able to now provide back, right? Whether, like you said, it's to them personally, it's to the family or whoever it might be.
And of course, to others, the next generation.
Bring people up.
Bring people up. And
yeah.
So, yes, without a doubt. And if you look at people like David Bonderman and certainly Michael Milken, extraordinary alumni, so to speak, who they've worked with, who've worked with them, and Richard Rainwater as well. And there's a lineage there.
Yeah,
that's quite extraordinary.
I think there's something that happens to you as well when you realize that somebody is actually invested in you. It doesn't have to be financially. Yeah. It could just be time, guidance. There's something that innately makes you want to do that back. And when you reach that time in your career where you actually have the ability to affect more people, I think that's when that kind of light bulb goes off in your head and it starts to kind of haunt you as well. I mean, in my case, having the career that I have had, it's been many times where I've thought, how can I have a greater impact? Like, what is the work that I'm doing? How is that benefiting other people? It's entertainment. And I was corrected one time and, it actually came true. I was in a Uber and I was just telling the story to the driver. He was asking what I was doing. And I said, yeah, like sometimes I think, what is the purpose of it? Creating sequences or imagery, for film or TV and entertainment. But ultimately, how is this helping your fellow human? And he said, well, you know what? There could be someone in another country that sees your work that then gets inspired by that work and wants to do what you do and have the passion, and you've opened up a doorway for them by you may not even know who that is, but they've seen it and you've inspired somebody. Right. And it really checked me because that's how I got here in this position. I saw somebody else's work. I wasn't 100% sure of what my direction was at that time while I was in university. I saw the work. I loved the work. I became obsessed with the work. I wanted to do that work. I made my own versions, reached out to the person who inspired me, and they offered a job to move from London to LA. And that changed the course of my life. So, I mean, sometimes we have to really, get out of our own head sometimes and think it's in stages.
Yes.
Right.
I think to your point, there was an Egyptian singer by the name of Kulthum, who you wouldn't necessarily think that a singer would have an impact on people's lives. But when she passed, 4 million people showed up in Cairo at her funeral. 4 million people. And her music is still played today all over Cairo. And, this was a woman born in a relatively poor family. Again, the daughter, not the son, who everyone was hoping for, but who was still embraced. And through, her father's teachings, her mother's love, was able to, become this extraordinary voice of the people of Egypt.
And it transcended probably beyond what she imagined.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And the impact she's had on multiple generations of people.
After her death.
Yes, in terms of their consciousness.
Yeah. Would you say that there's like a real big pivotal moment in your career where a mentor's like direct guidance has helped you unlock an opportunity?
Absolutely. First off, just the exposure to some of these folks has helped me to better understand how to manage other people and how to, get things done. Simple things. Richard Rainwater, I'm sitting in his office and he's saying, well, you should talk to so-and-so. He picks up the phone and gets it done. It doesn't, it doesn't linger. It doesn't,
procrastination.
Boom. And so, again, it's something I try to incorporate myself. In the case of David, he is always responsive. I mean, he's always been responsive, whether it's email, phone, text, and this is a man who's incredibly busy.
Yeah.
And so if he can take the time to respond to me, I should be able to take the time to respond to others. In the case of Michael Milken, his philanthropic efforts, in the case of prostate cancer, in the case of the Milken Institute, the Milken Center for the Advancement of the American Dream, where they're interviewing 10,000 people to talk about their experiences in the American dream and what it means. He's this created across from Treasury and the White House in Washington, D.C., this extraordinary center that really will house the content of these stories, but also what America's all about. And so understanding whether it's his efforts in cancer research, whether it's his efforts on behalf of what I would say is patriotic philanthropy, or his efforts in many different other ways, it really is among the things that I've learned from these extraordinary people.
Through absorption of this, of being around and paying attention and noticing.
Correct.
What works for them. I'm sure what doesn't work also.
But look, listen, and learn, and especially listen. There's a reason you have 2 ears and one mouth. So just,
listen, observe.
Listen and observe.
How do you spot talent? Like, you're obviously in a position where you have to hire people, or maybe you have people that do that for you. But how do you spot talent, and what is it about these people that make you want to extend an offer, extend a helping hand, extend your time, potentially mentorship?
It depends. First off, fortunately have a number of very good friends who, over time, we share similar values and perspectives with regard to people. And so I'll get references in from people who I trust.
Okay.
And therefore, that's an important screening tool. It's also the case that people reach out to me directly. And look, I try to assess people quickly and give them the benefit of the doubt, notwithstanding that it also creates some vulnerability, because the more successful you are, the more people are trying to get to you. And it's not 100%, notwithstanding that. I never want to be so cynical and so isolating that I don't allow myself the opportunity to be exposed to lots of different people. And, are there going to be some mistakes along the way? Absolutely. But that shouldn't take away from the joy that I feel when I have young men and women who I've been able to mentor or influence in some way and see their success.
Yeah. And you've built, you have a pretty robust network, as you said, pretty serious group of people who you can call upon, who probably call upon you as well. It's, as we discussed, it goes both ways. How are you able to build such a robust professional network of people?
How I've been able to do it two ways. One, I had a wonderful wife who, I have 6 kids. I always felt that my home was well taken care of. Again, I was participatory when I needed to be, but I relied on her, and she made sure that I was there when I needed to be. But otherwise, it was safe and secure and on the right track. So that was fundamentally helpful.
The time to be able to dedicate.
Yes. So the time to be able to dedicate, and she recognized the importance of it, and therefore I had the latitude to be able to do it.
Right.
The truth is, in observing some of my mentors, I saw their dedication. I saw their unrelenting drive and ambition to do and be whatever it took to make things happen. And so that was complementary to who I was already, because in order to generally get through pre-med and medical school and internship, and you have to be very hardworking. And in my case, because I'd done all of that, by the time I got to business, in some ways, it was easier, because I was already, this is who I was, already trained to be that way.
Yeah. So, board memberships, it seems to, I read, in your article, from mentorship to friendship to love, getting close to, if you have a desire to do something, you researched pretty heavily into how to get close to the equity or the finance to be able to do that. And it made me start thinking about, at this stage of career, the importance of looking for how else you can, contribute.
Mm-hmm.
It may be outside of your expertise, your direct expertise, whether it's like creative craft or something else, but participating as advisor to somebody who may be in a different position but may require like your skill set, right? How did you navigate that, or what turned you on to actually researching about becoming a member of different boards and being attached to different companies?
Part of my thesis was it's important to be in the right room with the right people. And so board memberships, in fact, allow you to have an impact in a bigger way, because you are at the seat with the CEO of, a multinational company or what have you. And those conversations can impact hiring practices. It can impact compensation. It can impact the future direction of the company, acquisitions, divestitures. And so being on the board is an enormous opportunity to really influence and have an impact beyond just the day-to-day. So that was part of my motivation. Secondly, you want to be on the right boards. The boards, in my particular case, where I have an interest on the not-for-profit side, again, being on the board of Caltech, very important academic institution, particularly in the STEM disciplines. And my desire to not only understand that world in a much better way, but also to make sure that people of color, that women especially, are included in that space. Again, the Milken Institute does a number of important philanthropic things, including, as I mentioned, the Center for Milken Center for the Advancement of the American Dream. You have the Milken Global Conference and conferences, which are included all over the world, which are important in terms of pillars regarding education, finance, global affairs, economics, a gathering place that really influences public policy in ways that make sense. We have the Black Economic Alliance, which is really an important institution that focuses on work, wages, and wealth in the Black community, led by businessmen and women, and in a way, has extraordinary impact. Because it's created a Center for Black Entrepreneurship, which is an educational component, housed at Spelman and Morehouse. Again, that's a curriculum,
the education
piece, but also connected to HBCUs everywhere, or Black people anywhere who are interested in online. But also, there's a Entrepreneurs Fund, Black Entrepreneurs Fund. Again, being the first risk capital into these enterprises, because there's a lack of friends and family money within the Black community. So that's really, really, important, and certainly the ability to serve the country in some way. So all of those things were things that I was honored to participate in.
And just to go back to private equity, could you break down exactly what that is and the role of your fund?
So private equity really is a financing or finance vehicle that came to be in the 90s. Or late 80s, in the late 80s, early 90s. The idea is, in the case of private equity, being able to raise capital, and these contracts are usually for about 10 years. Let's say You raise $100 million. You get a management fee, typically 2%. So $2 million a year for 10 years. There's usually a step off from, let's say, 2% to 1.5% or 1% after 5 years. But you raise this capital. Investors generally put up 99% of the capital. So $99 million, you're able to put in $1 million. So there's an alignment of interest. And within those, within that $100 million, you then look to invest in companies that you believe you can improve. And in our case, it's in healthcare. We try to focus on how do we improve patient outcomes? How do we lower the cost of healthcare? How do we create greater access? And so we really try to make good companies better companies. And in doing so, able to exit those companies at a better price than what we paid for them. And in doing so, generating profits. And in those profits, we get to split them. After we've returned all the money back to investors, we get to split those profits 80% to the investors and 20% to us as investors.
Understood. So it's still that I'm kind of drawing a parallel between how you view yourself and how you view helping others. It's like finding opportunities within companies that you have to believe in to be able to help them succeed more in the specifically in the healthcare system. And is the I guess like the direction of the funds more focused towards underserved communities?
Yes, both in urban and rural communities, across the U.S., where we feel like, again, by improving the healthcare of patients, we can lower the cost. And by lowering the cost, we can actually, believe it or not, generate more profits for the businesses. We're very much a profit-driven enterprise. Having said that, there's an impact component of what we do. We generally are in underserved communities in urban America, but also in rural communities across the U.S., because those have the greatest disparities in healthcare.
I'm sure you have a lot of self-reflection. You spoke about when you took some time out to really think. When you do have these moments of self-reflection, and also when we've heard, it might be some advice from mentors. Mentors generally help you see your blind spots sometimes. Things that you can't necessarily see when you're trying to achieve a goal over here. How do you balance your ego when somebody points out something that you may not be doing right, but you believe that you are? And it's one of the toughest things to do sometimes is to self-reflect and accept some of those pointers.
I think it's really important to have a degree of humility in life, period, whether it's personally, whether it's professionally. You have a good partner in your life, personally or professionally, they'll be able to check you in ways that you don't necessarily like, but you should respect. And, in doing so, they have your best interest in mind, and therefore take a step back and listen. And so I think it's really an important point in life in general. None of us has all the answers. None of us knows everything. None of us is perfect. And so you should be more concerned when people don't point out the error of your ways. You should be more concerned when all you hear is yes, when all you hear is you're doing everything right, because that puts you at the greatest vulnerability. You may have some short-term feel good about it, but the long-term consequences will be devastating.
Yeah. So you have to be very open to receiving criticism, which I think we do every day, and the creative side of things for sure.
and again, look, you have to, I think you're absolutely right. Look, first off, there's a way to deliver the news, meaning constructive criticism. So the person who's giving it also needs to deliver it in a way that can be received in a way that that person can accept it. And
Yeah.
so creatives tend to be much more sensitive in some ways. And so you want this person to be successful. So don't bludgeon them over the head with the advice. Do it in a way that's constructive and in a way that will benefit them and benefit everyone.
Yeah. And not everybody is the same. Not everybody receives critique the same way. Not everybody responds, in an identical manner. So I think part of being a leader in whatever your respective career might be is to be able to understand the human that's in front of you and be able to pivot ways in which you communicate. I think is an important thing, because what works for one person may not work for the other.
Precisely.
Yeah. Besides the mentorship side of things, are there any strategies that have really kept you on your path of your pursuit of excellence?
What I would say, and this sounds maybe a little old school. Part of my drive is never to disappoint my parents. My parents have both passed, decades ago, but it still is a driving force in my life to not disappoint them, and for that matter, to make my kids proud of who I am and what I'm about.
Right. And, looking forward to the future, like how would you say you would like to be remembered as a mentor, a leader? And do you continue to seek out this guidance at the stage of career and success that you have? Are you still seeking mentorship from people every day?
Without a doubt. Look, I'm always in the business of learning. I feel like I'm in the business of learning. I can learn from people, and I enjoy learning from people, and I want to learn from people. And so I'm constantly, stimulated by new thinking, different ways of approaching things. And so that gives me joy. That gives me joy. So I think that, in my case, look, I want to continue to build the very best business I can build. I want to continue to have the most impact that I have in a positive way. I want to continue to try to influence young people, especially in ways that give them hope, that give them the belief that they can not be as successful as I can, but more successful than I am, and not just professionally, but personally. And so it's important to me because people have taken the time to invest in me that I invest in others.
And what currently is keeping you up at night?
The U.S. election. We're not going to go into politics.
That's a whole other conversation.
Exactly.
In your opinion, and I ask this similar question to everyone that comes on the podcast, and been rethinking how I actually ask this, but in your opinion, what does it really take to be a leader in a professional environment?
I think I like to reflect on what Dr. Martin Luther King said. He said, anyone can lead because anyone can serve. So learning how to serve others puts you in a position to be able to lead others. And so I think it's really that understanding of other people by serving other people puts you in a position to have empathy. It puts you in a position to have discipline. It puts you in a position to have strength. It puts you in a position to be forceful, to be tactful, to be demanding, but also to be understanding.
So in my first episode of this podcast, it was all about reputation equity. And, we discussed the value that you can provide to others. and how you represent yourself and how others perceive you. And I've always reflected on the relationships that I have and who I surround myself with, as well as my own reputation. And, as the saying goes, you're a reflection of who is in your inner circle, and, the credibility of those that are around you also have a reflection on you. How have you applied this in your own life, if we think about the relationships of people you've met and who have been influential in your life?
Yes. Part of it came from reading. There was a very well-known businessman, I think his name was Jay Pritzker, who I read an article about him or a book about him, and it was the importance of, within his community of friends who he did business with, of keeping their word. And so there was some big transaction that he was involved in, and someone made a proposition, they'd agreed on it, and it was more or less a handshake deal. And I came to understand through his explaining it was, sure, we can paper this, we'll do all of that, but this is between you and me. And so if you're going to be dishonest, it doesn't matter how much paperwork, this is you and me.
Right.
And so I trust you to do what you say you're going to do. You trust me to fund this, and we're going to be okay. And if it doesn't work out, sometimes business doesn't work. That's okay. But as long as you're honest with me, as long as you're doing your best with me,
right,
we're going to be okay.
And that you can see the same level of effort that's
Correct.
Coming from
absolutely
the person that's approached you.
Without a doubt.
And you're obviously going to put in that level of effort too.
No question about it.
Right. But things can go either way.
Yep.
Right.
So anyway, you learn life lessons. You continue to learn life lessons all along the way.
Yeah.
I absorb those things, but also I think it's really, really important to have fun along the way, to enjoy yourself, to have fun, to laugh, to, be with your friends and share in the joy of this life, which only, to the best of our knowledge, the best of my knowledge, is you only get to do it one time.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it sounds like taking those risks and, looking at the business side of things can kind of aid with that, right?
Yes.
To provide you, I think the ultimate thing everyone is trying to get more of is time.
Yes.
And to be able to enjoy your family, enjoy the time that we do have. And, hopefully we're helping people along the way.
Right. And you hit upon a very important word, and that's risk. Look, fortunately, in America, the risk is something that is not frowned upon, and in fact, in many ways is embraced. And it doesn't necessarily matter your religion or skin color or, caste system, whatever that is. You have a great idea, you surround yourself with great people. People are going to want to participate, and they're not going to ask, if you're the fifth generation, Lord, Manor, or what have you. And we've seen this happen time and time again. Again, it's not perfect. Don't misunderstand me, but it is an extraordinary place to be able to carve out a life.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate to be a beneficiary of this great soil.
And what do you think that is? Because I realize that obviously I always use this phrase of, like sometimes when you're inside the bottle, you can't read the label. And when I have conversations with some people that I've met here, often younger, that grew up in LA, maybe grew up even in more of a privileged environment, not necessarily seeing what you have, but from the outside, and coming from the UK especially, I think I mentioned before, realizing very quickly when I graduated that the success ladder was a ladder, and you go rung by rung by rung. And seeing what it was like over here, if you have the talent, you don't have to go step by step by step. You can jump 10. So long as you have the talent and somebody can see that in you, I think risk is a big thing. Somebody will take that risk with you. But what is it culturally about America and the experience that you've had here that you think really opened that door?
Well, first, again, I go back to my parents, their unconditional love. But I would also say I was very fortunate at the age of 16. I was an exchange student to Greece. Yeah. And Greece was under military dictatorship at the time, and my friends were anarchists and communists and left and right and hated the United States. I was like, well, I don't understand. Well, apparently they said that, the U.S. government intervened and overthrew the government of Greece and put in a military dictatorship. And so they were all being very critical of America, but all my friends were trying to get a green card to get to America. I was like, well, now I'm confused. And as I, kind of explored this more, they were like, yeah, we still want to be in America because it's a land of opportunity. And so it gave me insight into the immigrant mentality. If you're coming over on the boat from Vietnam, potato famine in Ireland, pogroms in Russia, Ukraine, whatever, you get to the U.S., things are challenging, tough, but you have a frame of reference to say, yeah, but you have no idea how it is in so-and-so and such and such. So I think the secret sauce of America really is this immigrant mentality. And my exposure in Greece helped me to understand that. Because for historical reasons, many Blacks in America, because of slavery, don't have that frame of reference as an immigrant. It gave me the understanding and the appreciation that despite the challenges within our country, it is a great country and it is constantly renewing itself, and there's the opportunity to make it better. And so I need to, do my part to make it better by being successful in my own right.
Yeah. And I've seen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because this is my sort of more recent observations, that America is set up to benefit business owners and people who take risks.
Yes, I think that absolutely is the case. Yes.
Yeah. Being employed for quite a long time, venturing out for a few years to actually explore what it was like to own a business, I definitely saw that there were reasons to be a business owner here, for sure.
And again, it's not perfect, but I think, again, part of the secret sauce of America, not only immigration, but again, you see what happens in Silicon Valley. You see, you see what happens even in philanthropy. America is one of these places where people are like, we don't need, Warren Buffett is like, I got to give this money away. I can't. We don't want to be, these wealthy barons for multiple generations that perpetuate some type of aristocracy. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
And it's unique in that regard relative to other countries and civilizations, for that matter.
Yeah. Finally, for those who might be in a similar position as you were, in a career that maybe you don't have the full 100% passion, or maybe just coasting along and potentially be a little bit fearful of making a pivot in their life. And I said earlier, you recognized quite young. I mean, you were 24 when you recognized that you wanted to make a change. But some people don't recognize that as early. And, you might be in your 30s, you might be in your 40s. might be in your 50s. Do you have any advice for people in that position who may be really questioning doing that?
I call it the inertia of one's success. It is for many successful people, they have relative success, and it's so easy to keep doing what you're doing. Again, I found myself in that position as a physician. I was doing well. Life was great. I was making more money than I ever thought I would make. And it really is easy to keep doing what you're doing because it seems so secure, comfortable, and there is no anxiety around it. Notwithstanding that, I didn't want to, going back to my time in Egypt, I didn't want to look back on my life and say, I wish I woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Yeah.
And that's what led me to ultimately force myself in the uncomfortable position to really challenge myself in a different way.
It's the regret.
Yes. And now my friends at the time, many of my doctor friends thought I was crazy. Fast forward, many of them are saying, oh my God, get us out of here, please. Because medicine's changed. What you perceive to be as safe and secure and comfortable isn't necessarily that.
Right.
Isn't necessary because times change, circumstances change. And so what you feared in terms of taking risk is maybe even a more stable opportunity than in fact what you were holding on to.
Right. Exactly. And could potentially provide you what you're really looking for. Instead of staying in something for decades, take the risk. It could happen sooner.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Now you've got a flight soon. I really appreciate you taking the time at such short notice to come and have this conversation with me. And definitely it's been an inspiration to hear your story and also to hear about somebody in your position with your experience that's also willing to give time to others, which I think is really important. It's quite rare, and so definitely taking some inspiration from your book. And thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here, and thank you for your leadership and making a difference in the lives of others.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Trying. Thank you.
We both are. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kneeland. Thank you for listening to this episode of Object, Subject, Form. Your engagement helps build a community of like-minded creatives as we navigate the complexities of our respective creative journeys together. If these stories and topics inspire you throughout the series, I encourage you to subscribe, share, and follow me through the links provided in the episode description.